So fire is one of the 4 key priorities for survival, and learning to light a fire by friction is a very useful and fun skill to learn. So in this video I'm going to show you my favourite method for the bow drill friction fire. So stay tuned. So although learning to light a fire by friction is a fantastic skill to have, I think it's important to mention that, you know, if you're planning a trip into the wild, you should never solely rely on friction methods. You should always carry multiple more reliable ways of getting a fire going, things like ferro rods, lighters, matches, stuff like that. But that being said, it's fantastic to continue practicing friction fire methods and always have that skill up your sleeve for an emergency. There's many different types of friction fires and they differ from different cultures and, you know, where you are in the world. But most of them, what they have in common is that you usually have 2 pieces of wood rubbing together, creating heat by friction, but also creating a dust that acts as the tinder and creates an ember. You can then transfer that ember into a tinder bundle that you can then blow into flame. So the method that we're going to look at today is called the bow drill friction fire method, because you're using a bow as a sort of mechanical tool to help you, and because of that, this is arguably the most efficient friction fire method for this area of the world, you know, Northern Europe, partly because the materials are easier to find, but because of the mechanical advantage of the bow, it's a bit more forgiving with wetter conditions and less than ideal materials. So let's run through all the components and the sort of dimensions that I found have worked best for me. And to make these, all you really need is a good sturdy knife, and it also helps to have some sort of saw, even just a small saw that you can get in Swiss Army knives. But these are the main components for this method. So this is the spindle. I like to make mine about the length of my forearm and about as thick as my thumb. This is the hearth board or fire board. I like to make it usually about as thick as my thumb. This one's a wee bit thinner, but it still works. And it just needs to be wider than the width of the spindle. So here we have the bow. I like to find a stick that's the length of my arm. And you see some people, you know, thinking it's the same as like an archery bow, and they pick something that's springy, but that's just going to take energy out of your technique. So find a bit of wood that's solid. A slight curve in it does help, but you know, a straight bit actually works fine as long as there's nothing that's going to get in the way of the spindle. The cord, I'm using 550 paracord, but just, you know, any cord that's going to be strong enough. You do need something quite strong for this method, and that's arguably one of the downsides for this method. I mean, people say you can use your shoelaces and stuff like that, but yeah, you do need a strong bit of cord. You could make this out of natural materials, but you're just going to make sure it needs to be strong. And I've got a trucker's hitch or bowyer's knot at the top, and then I've just whipped it on one end, and the area that I've just whipped it is where I'm going to hold it to make sure that doesn't come undone. Now you need a bearing block. Now this is actually 2 limpet shells glued together. You don't need to glue them together, you can just balance them, but this is, you know, easier when I'm teaching lessons and stuff, and I found this works absolutely fantastic. But you know, you could use a harder bit of wood hollowed out with some leaves or something in it to lubricate it. If you can also use something like Vaseline or lip balm, sun cream, just something that you can put inside that's going to lubricate that action. Finally, you need an ember tray, something to catch that hot dust, and that will turn into an ember. Now it could be a piece of bark, this is just a piece of cardboard, just something that's nice and dry that's going to sit underneath your board and catch the embers. So all these components are going to give you an ember, but if you want to turn that ember into a flame, then you're going to need a tinder bundle. So this is just some dry grass. I've got thicker stuff on the outside, slightly thinner stuff on the inside. And then to finish off the tinder bundle, I like to use the seed heads of cattail. And now you could use cotton wool or something, just as long as you've broken it up and it's fine enough. And you put that in the middle of the tinder bundle, and that's going to act like the sort of defined baby food for your baby ember. But it also, because it's nice and fine, it stops your hot dust from falling through your tinder bundle. So those are all the components you need to actually get a bowl drill friction fire going. But if, you know, right now you want to practice this and you don't have anywhere that you can safely, you know, make some flames, say if you just have a shed or something, as long as it's fairly well ventilated, you're not going to smoke yourself out, then you can still practice with this and just create embers. You know, that's half the battle, or at least majority of the battle, is to get an ember. It's another skill to make that ember blow into flame, but you know, you can practice this fairly safely. But if you want to practice blowing it into flame, make sure that, you know, you're outside in a safe area. And I have a metal firebox next to me right here that I'm going to put my burning grass into, so it's not going to burn the lawn. I'm going to mention some different types of woods that I've found have worked, but if you don't know your different types of trees, or these types of trees don't grow near you, don't be disheartened. I mean, you can use bits of old pallets, you can use random bits of timber lying around your house. But for me, if the only thing you have to work with to see if your wood will work is that just make sure that your spindle and your fireboard is made out of wood that's not too resinous, and also a wood that's just soft enough to mark it with your fingernail. And the spindle can be a little bit harder than the hearth board, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, just make sure that it's soft enough to mark with your fingernail. And if you follow those 3 rules, then you've got a fighting chance. Another important thing is that when you get on to actually doing the method, is to look at the dust. Now, I think the quality of the dust can tell you a lot about the quality of the wood you're using. What you're really looking for is a nice, fine black dust, as fine as you can get it, and that's going to create an ember really quickly. If you're putting a lot of effort in and you're not hardly making any dust at all, then your wood is probably too hard and you're going to waste energy, so try something softer. If it completely breaks apart, then obviously it's too soft, so it's somewhere in between there. If your dust looks like small black needles, then sometimes it works, but it just doesn't work as well. It just happens with some types of wood. So either change the wood or just try a different area of the board. Sometimes the hardness of the wood can vary throughout your board. So just try it out and really look at the quality of dust you're getting, and you're looking for that nice fine black dust. Now for this particular set, both the spindle and the fireboard are made from the same piece of elder. So that's the same tree that you get elderflowers, elderberries, and I found this is working really, really well, this particular set. You know, elder is really common where I live. It grows all around the UK, especially in sort of, you know, wasteland areas. It's quite a hardy tree, and you can find nice dry dead bits still on the tree. Now there is quite a big pith running through the wood, and that can be a problem for your spindle. So you just want to find a bit of wood that's thicker than your spindle, and you can split that out and carve it. Now for the spindle, then you've got a kind of sharp, pointy pencil end. And this is where your bearing block's going to be. That's where you want to reduce the amount of friction as much as possible on that end, so that's why it's got a lower surface area. And then the other end, you've got a blunter end, and that's where the magic's going to happen. Now for the board, again, I had a piece of elder about that big. I then just, you know, got my knife and batoned it into a plank, carved it into a plank that's just about as thick as my thumb. Now there's lots of other different types of wood that works. For example, here's an old set. This is hazel, and the board is made from a really rotten piece of sycamore. Now this is probably on the further edge of the softer scale. I wouldn't go anything softer than this because it was kind of falling apart in some bits of the wood, but it still worked really, really well. And this is, you know, this hazel's quite hard, the sycamore's really soft, and that was making some good embers really, really quickly. So that works. I've also used willow with lots of success. Willow, it's a bit more common up in the Highlands where I lived for a while, so I was using willow for most of my sets. You can use, there's lots and lots of trees you can use. So once you've got all your components and you've made your spindle with a sharp end, a blunt end, and your fireboard, then you're ready to start burning a divot. So as you can see here, these are two ones that I've used already. There's actually still enough wood that I could reuse these to get another ember, but for the sake of this lesson, I'll make a new one for you guys. So basically, you're going to start the divot just with the top of your knife, and then you're going to use the bowl drill method to burn in a little circular divot for the spindle to sit in comfortably. You're then going to use your knife or saw to cut in and make a little notch. You want your spindle to be sitting that distance from the edge. You don't want it too close to the edge because there's a danger it might pop out, but you don't want to be so far in that you're having to cut really far your notch. So just about that distance. So I'm going to get the tip of my knife and it's being really careful. I just move the board around and just do these sort of circular movements. Even doing this, you can start to tell what the characteristics of the wood is like. So I'm seeing that this wood is really soft. Now to get the spindle in place, you've got your pencil pointy end facing up at the sky. You put it about halfway onto the string and you're wrapping it towards your hand that you're holding the bow in. So you just wrap it like that, and it should be tight enough so that when it sits in place, it wants to spring back out. That's the sort of correct tension you need. I am right-handed, so I'm going to have my right knee down and then going to put my left foot onto the board with my divot just on the inside of that foot. Now you want to make sure my bow hand's going to be moving this way, so you want to make sure that you've got plenty of room. Make sure you don't have a firebox to bash your elbow against. You put your spindle into your divot, put the bearing block on top, so you're in this sort of position. Now you hold the bow where the whip is, and I like to put my thumb onto the string, and this means that you can control the tension a little bit. And you're just doing nice, smooth, backwards and forwards motions parallel to the ground. People often do this, like they start tilting the bow starts digging into the ground and stuff. Just make sure you're in good technique first, and then when you get comfortable, then you can increase the speed. You can already see some smoke there. Remember, we're just creating a divot. But from this point, you can tell a lot about the wood. So I'm seeing my spindle is smoking, so that's a good sign. And also, I'm starting to see the quality of the dust there. You can see a nice fine dust, fine brown dust to begin with. This was me just getting into the motion, but I wasn't putting that much downward pressure or speed into it, so it wasn't starting to get hot enough to combust. But then in the inside, hopefully you can see it, you can see a nice black fine dust, and that's what you're looking for, something nice and fine. So you know you can make a set, burn in a divot and just look at it and you think, oh, you know, that dust, it's not looking right, it's too big, it looks like big needles, or I'm not creating enough. Then either make a new board, make a new spindle, or just try somewhere else on the board. For the next part, we're going to be cutting a notch, just like these two. And this is quite an important part to get right. It's basically what the notch does is that as a spindle is spinning round, it's creating hot dust, and every time it goes round, that dust is being created and then falls through that notch and collects in a pile. So you're imagining all that spinning, you're collecting all of that heat and all of that tinder and concentrating it into one spot. And the width of it, again, is quite important. If it's too wide, then you're reducing the surface area of where the friction can happen, and you're reducing the effectiveness, and also the spindle can burn through that notch and pop out. But if you make it too narrow, then just the dust doesn't collect properly and you're not creating enough heat. But a good reference tool is a standard kind of Mora knife. It's a really popular bushcraft knife. The tip of the blade is actually quite a good reference. If that fits in nice and comfortably into that notch, then that's a good sort of size. So I use just the tip of my mower knife as a wee reference tool. So I'm going to cut a little notch in. Now you can just do it all with a knife, but it takes a bit longer. So I just like to use my wee saw on my Swiss Army knife. So I just make a little mark going from the edge towards the center of your circular divot, and then it's coming in, being nice and careful, and you're just cutting a direct kind of perpendicular cut towards your circular divot. And just make sure that you don't go too far. It's just beginning to enter the circular divot. You can either do some saw cuts diagonally to make your triangle, or you can use your knife. This little cut. So there you go, I made a little triangular notch going into the black divot, and that is about as far as I like to take it inside the black circle. Now another trick I found that works quite well is that on the other side of the board is just to remove a little bit of wood from the kind of the apex of your triangle, just like I've done here, and this allows your dust to form a better pile, almost like a cone shaped pile, and it also allows some oxygen to get in to keep your ember alive. So I just use the tip of my knife to just splay that bit out. Now in wet conditions you want to do everything you possibly can to minimize the amount of moisture that could get into your spindle and fireboard. So, you know, if the ground is wet, make sure that your spindle's off the ground, put it on a bit of stone, put it on a camping mat, a blanket, something like that. And if you're going to be putting your foot on the board to do the technique, put something between your wet shoe and the board, because again there could be water on the sole of your shoe, and if that goes into the board then you're just making your life difficult. So this is a piece of leather that I use for lessons. I usually put that on the board. For wet conditions you could use just whatever you have. You know, you could do this on a nice sunny day and it'll be super easy, but you know, do it early morning, late evening when there's moisture in the air, there's a dew point, and you might find that it's very difficult. Now when you get into actually trying to get an ember, I like to keep an eye on the notch. So hopefully if everything's going well, your spindle is spinning nice and fast, you're going to be creating that lovely fine black dust that I talked about, and it's going to be falling into this notch, creating a little pile. And as you go along with your bow and this is spinning, just keep an eye on that pile, and hopefully it's going to build up and up until it's starting to touch the bottom of the spindle. So this spindle is going to get really hot. So I like to think of it, the dust is your tinder, it's building up, and as you can see it's getting to the top of the notch and it's touching the bottom of the spindle. Then that's when the ignition is starting to happen. So when you see that happening and you're getting lots and lots of smoke, then build up your speed and put in a bit more energy into your methods, so that ideally the heat of the spindle is going to ignite your pile of dust and hopefully get an ember. So let's see if we can get this going. So try clear the area of ground around you, make sure that you're on a nice flat area of ground. I've got my my ember tray underneath my notch, just like that. Left foot on top. I like to put the sort of middle of my foot, front middle, so that you've got your entire body weight above the ember, or above the notch, sorry. Got my spindle wrapped. Remember, pencil end facing upwards. Spindle on the outside of the string, that's important to notice. It does sort of work if it's in the inside of the bow, but it's more likely going to bash against the bow. So spindle on the outside of the cord. Spindle in place. Your bearing block on top. Get in position I just start off nice and steady using the entire length of the bowl. So just take your time. It's about efficiency of movement, not just getting tired. You should be able to talk when you do this. I'm seeing lots of nice smoke. I'm seeing the pile of dust build up, increasing my speed. And then you know you have an ember when you can take everything away and that it's smoking by itself. So we've got an ember. Now at this point, just take your time. A lot of people freak out and start running around. Just take your time. See if we'll get the camera a bit closer. So you can sort of fan the ember with your hand, and when it starts glowing, that's when you know you can transfer it. I'm sort of protecting it from the wind. So get your tinder bundle, get your knife, got your nice soft bit of cattail, and I just use my knife to try to transfer it nice and gently. I'll move the camera again. Okay, so I've got my firebox ready. I've got my baby ember in its bed. I close it up, keeping it nice and cozy. You want that ember to be wrapped up a little bit in the tinder bundle, and then you're just blowing nice and gently to start with. Bundle held up like this so the heat is coming up and through it. So there you go. We have fire! So I couldn't really explain when I was blowing on the tinder bundle there, but hopefully you saw it, that as I was holding the bundle up and blowing through it, you saw that the smoke was getting thicker and thicker, and it gets to a point where the smoke is almost yellow and it's really, really dense, and you know that's when it's about to pop, it's about to get going. So increase your strength of the breath, blow up and through the bundle, and then hopefully you're going to get some flames. So there you go folks, hope you enjoyed that video about my favourite method for the bowl drill friction fire. Just give it a go with whatever sort of timber, whatever sort of wood you have to hand. Don't get too worried about the different trees and things like that. Just try it out. You know, it's all about learning through failure. There's a good saying that I like, the difference between the master and the student is that the master has failed more than the student has tried. And that's very applicable to friction fires. The number of times I've done it just not worked. You just keep on going, keep trying it, use different woods, practice different size notches, practice in different weather conditions. You could say I was cheating because it's a beautiful sunny day, everything's nice and dry. This is much more difficult when it's damp. But have fun with it folks, and enjoy yourselves.